All right, well, thanks, folks. Here we are, finished session at 2:20 in the afternoon. And basically, I think Democrats were waving the white flag of surrender. This was the least productive session in modern history. We only looked back as far as 1985. There has not been a least productive session or less productive sessions in that time. We did not get a single bill on the governor's desk, budget bill, and unfortunately, we left a lot of things undone. And what I heard from Democrat leaders is all we get is excuses as to why they couldn't get their work done. In fact, I was actually shocked to be in the chamber at 2:20 when we adjourned and Democrats applauded themselves. And I literally said, "You're applauding yourselves?" It was shocking. Today, 250,000 Minnesotans that received unemployment benefits will have to write a check to the state government for state income taxes on those payments. Democrats say they support exempting them. Here we are with hours left to get that work done, and Democrats literally threw those Minnesotans who were displaced workers. They were laid off during the pandemic, and they literally threw them under the bus and then backed the bus right over them today. It's not good enough to stand at a microphone and say that you made a deal. What it is good enough to do is to get in there and get your job done, which Democrats have absolutely failed to do. In addition to that, the governor's emergency powers, there are some severe problems with the agreement that was negotiated. Number one, it didn't get the PPP and the unemployment insurance done today when it needed to get done. There is a problem with the governor spending $500 million. Who from the legislative branch would ever agree to let the governor spend $500 million on whatever he wanted should turn in their election certificates and find a new job, because that is literally what the legislature exists for. There is no clear end to the emergency powers, which we all know now the governor does not need. The mask mandate's over. We just heard Democrats standing at this microphone saying that this pandemic is apparently over. That's what they said, exact quote. But yet we're going to allow the governor to keep his emergency powers, and that has not been a negotiated end to that. There is no fifth year of reinsurance. We're told that Democrats have negotiated to end the reinsurance program, and we're not sure what's going to happen to the people who will lose their health insurance because of that in the state of Minnesota. Not to mention that number 7 on that agreed upon list of items from the legislative leaders and the governor, again, reinstates the tribunal. So, or is that what it's called? Yeah. Tribunal. And in reality, that may sound like we're all working together. The problem is, and we heard Democrats stand here just minutes ago saying that it was okay and they were going to let the conference committee chairs work out the differences. But number 7 on that list literally says that the 3 leaders and the governor have to sign off on every bill. That agreement is literally unconstitutional. The governor does not have the constitutional right to write legislation, and he does not get to veto provisions in bills before those bills pass the House and the Senate. That is, by definition, unconstitutional. It was the harshest criticism of the last negotiations 2 years ago, and here it is rearing its ugly head again in the agreement today. Not to mention the last agreement on that list literally preserves the governor's right to veto the bills after, so he not only can veto them before they're agreed to, but he also gets to veto them once they get to his desk. He has negotiated himself an incredible amount of power in this deal that the legislature should not have ceded to him. The legislature should have negotiated this agreement between the House and the Senate and sent the bills to the governor's desk. The governor's opportunity to weigh in comes when the bills get to his desk, when he can either sign them or veto them. There isn't another option unless legislators give him that power, and the Senate Majority Leader and the Speaker of the House apparently gave up that power to the governor again after being roundly criticized for it 2 years ago. So unfortunately, there's a lot of bad in this agreement, and there's a lot of bad that's going to happen to Minnesotans in the meantime because Democrats could not get their job done. And that's the biggest problem with this legislative session. Representative New? What did I miss?
Well, I'm not sure that you missed much, but I would really just reiterate that it is a huge failure that we have small business owners and folks who were unemployed this year writing checks to the state of Minnesota today because we couldn't get our job done. This is a huge failure on the part of the Democrats in the legislature. Everyone knew it was going to happen all along. The governor, Senate Leader Gazelka, Speaker Hortman, they all knew all the way along that this was going to happen, and yet we have folks who will be writing checks to the state of Minnesota today. It is a huge failure on behalf of the legislature, and it's really a sad day for Minnesotans.
Can I ask Representative Daudt a question? The way I understood, and I can't say that I understand it, the $500 million was similar to the $500 million that y'all appropriated last spring, that it would go through that process you created last spring with, I don't know if it's 8 of you or 10 of you, we're supposed to review those and give it up or down.
That is not my understanding. The federal money that came from the federal government in the latest coronavirus relief package gets put into a federal contingency account, and it gets spent through a process called the LAC, or Legislative Advisory Commission. The Legislative Advisory Commission can simply advise the governor, and they can slow it down for about 2 weeks. But ultimately, the governor can spend that money on whatever he wants. It is not my understanding that that money will go through that sort of process or committee that we had set up last year. The real problem with that is the money that came from the federal government last year and the money that we appropriated last year was appropriated with strings attached. This money literally has almost zero strings attached, and the governor can spend it on almost whatever he wants, with very few exceptions.
This go through LAC, and they said no, it will go through, I forget the initials you use for that process last year. It was the COVID state, LCRC.
That is not my understanding, but actually it wouldn't necessarily even be appropriate for that committee to be weighing in on that expenditures in that way. And I'll also remind you that that committee did not have the ability to stop anything. If Democrats in the House wanted to approve the governor's appropriation in that area, then if Democrats in the House and the governor sided together, the governor could spend it on whatever he wanted. So it would take both a majority of the House and a majority of the Senate members of that committee to stop something. And that was the flaw with that particular arrangement. So the governor will be able to spend that money. If that bill goes through without stronger language, he'll be able to spend that money on whatever he wants, which is really a problem with just letting him do that without the legislature appropriating it. After all, that is why we're here. We exist for the purpose of appropriating the money in the state of Minnesota.
I take it Senator Gazelka and his team didn't bring you in and say, is any of this something you'd be willing to go along with on the entire deal, because you seem to be very upset with the structure of it?
No, I wouldn't say I'm upset with it. It's.
So that the person who agreed to this should have their election certificate.
I believe that the legislature exists to appropriate the money and be the oversight, and letting the governor have $500 million with no oversight and no appropriation and no transparency that comes along with that, the committee hearings and people coming in to testify, I believe that is not acceptable.
But how about the entirety?
I was not involved in the negotiations, to answer your question directly.
How about the entirety of the deal? Is there?
You know, I just, as I look at it, I've got a list of 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there's 6 things that I find unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable in the deal, that I wouldn't have accepted a single one of them, let alone all 6. And I can't point to something to say this is what the Republicans got out of this deal. So, unfortunately. And the people who got screwed in this deal are the Minnesotans who are going to have to write checks today. 250,000 plus Minnesotans who were laid off during the pandemic, who will now be taxed on the unemployment benefits that they received from the federal government, and 200,000 plus Minnesota businesses who accepted PPP loans to keep their people employed. They were helping our state and our economy, and frankly now those businesses will have to write checks as well to pay state income tax. And remember, in order to have your PPP loan forgiven, you were not allowed to set money aside to pay the taxes. You had to spend it all. That was one of the requirements. So what we're doing at a time when Minnesota businesses have been through a really traumatic last year is this is kind of the final blow to make them write a check out. And for anybody who operates an LLC, those checks are due today. If you were a corporation, an S or C corporation, those taxes were due back in March, but if you're an LLC, those checks get written today.
Should any of those other three expect that you'll negotiate a bonding bill exclusive of everything else, or do you feel like you deserve input in everything in order to get a bonding bill together?
Well, I don't know. I heard both leaders say that they had enough votes in their caucuses to pass everything. And you know, the speaker stood here and said that she hadn't had the opportunity yet to visit with me. I have made myself available every day for the last month to talk with any of them at any time, and unfortunately they did not take us up on that. So at this point, a bonding bill has not even been discussed, so I wouldn't write your stories with any numbers because there literally hasn't even been a single conversation about a bonding bill.
You said Republicans didn't get anything out of this budget, but I mean the biggest thing that you wanted is no tax increases. That's not here, and I know it didn't come on the day you wanted, but there is the UI and full UI and PPP conformity.
Those are things that everybody wanted. So tax increases have been off the table for months, and they were never going to happen, nor should they have happened. We have a $4.4 billion surplus. There is no reason for a tax increase, and nobody in the state should celebrate that there isn't going to be a tax increase. There never was going to be a tax increase. The fact that PPP and UI isn't done today, I think, is an abject failure, and it's not just something we wanted. Remember, it was in the House bill and it was in the Senate bill. And one side doesn't get to say, well, you got this, when that's something everybody wanted. That's something that just is something we should have done today for Minnesotans, and I think it's a failure that it didn't get done today.
One more question.
I guess just to follow up on the bonding bill question, do you feel like that gives you leverage at all in reshaping the parts that have already been agreed upon to say, if you want a bonding bill, we get some say on the rest?
You know, potentially. They need 11 of our votes. I think that's the number to pass a bonding bill. That number's not going to be easy to get. Our members are not happy that we weren't included, and we're not necessarily happy with the agreement that was reached. So we have invited the Senate Republicans to a joint caucus this afternoon, and hopefully we'll have a good conversation about how we move forward from here.
We've got to get them downstairs.
Thank you all.